Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast for Backlot Banter, where we review every single Palme d'Or winner. We are making our way through the series one film at a time in random order. We, of course, bow down to the gods of random chance at the end of every episode. We're going to do that today. Today, we are talking about the Jacques Cousteau film, 1956, a documentary, The Silent World, about the ocean and what goes on beneath the surface, where you can't hear anything. I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say, though, about...
Actually, can't you hear more because water carries sound waves farther?
Yes.
Our ears aren't attuned to that, though.
But
fair.
Tucker's very right. You guys know my stuff for me. Thanks for getting that out of the way. Here, at the top of the episode. Okay. This movie, we're going to have fun talking about it. But first, I'll remind you of what we did last week, because we had a movie that I'll say was less fun. It was called The White Ribbon. And, well, while being about child abuse and other nasty stuff, we gave it a pretty good score. It got a 7.3 because we thought it was an effective movie. That put it at the spot number 13 on the list, below La Dolce Vita and above Dancer in the Dark. So where will this documentary, I think this is the only documentary we're going to get, or we have gotten.
We got two, pal.
We got two. Okay.
I'm excited for the other one.
Yes. There's one more on the list, and counting. You know, we never know what the Cannes Film Festival might do in the near future. But anyway,
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Before we hear some thoughts,
Titan is a documentary.
Real.
Sure, bud. Abram, do you have a featured comment from one of the recent videos that we published?
I do. We're going to go back to the tin drum for this one. Short comment here from Slim Knave 4846.
Classic.
Says the following. A very weird movie. I sincerely hope that this movie did not permanently scar the main actor.
Yeah.
It
probably did.
I mean, he was actually 14 at the time, right?
Yeah.
Something like that?
I think 12. I don't think he was quite 14. 12 or 13. We just saw him in something else, didn't we?
He did. He showed up.
Well, I'll find out. One second.
What have we seen recently? Was it Alien Romulus?
No, well, close. It's Ridley Scott's Legend is what Tucker and I saw him in. He plays like a little imp or something of that nature. Yeah.
Well, clearly he wasn't scarred if he went and starred in Ridley Scott's Legend.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. Is that
It's
really...
like a fantasy movie. There's something else that someone said that I wanted to comment on, but it's okay.
Starring a young actor?
Yeah.
That's something you're familiar with.
Slim Knave, I wanted to comment on that name. It sounds like something a Skyrim guard would yell at you.
Ah.
Get out of here, you Slim Knave!
No, Maeve.
Oh, no, I thought he said Knave.
I used to play the Pirates of the Caribbean MMO.
Right.
It sounds like the name that it auto-generate for you. When you
Sure.
play.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. Adjective noun.
Yeah.
Random number sequence. Yes.
Kind of like the titles for all these movies. The Silent World.
Nope. All right. We're not getting into that.
All right.
Alrighty.
Who wants to... Well, Tanner, first, this is less of a
Plot synopsis?
plot-based movie, but maybe give a little, I don't know, some words
So have you
about
heard of
what
the
it
ocean?
is.
Yeah.
I don't know. What would you say to tell...
So, in 1956, no one had heard of the ocean. Okay? They had
What the heck is that?
They had no idea what it is until the first guy to discover it, Jacques Cousteau.
Yeah. He went outside and he looked like,
What is
what the
that?
heck?
So he's like,
We should look into that.
We got to get some cameras and look at this thing. Okay, no. The real background for this film is that this is a documentary directed in part by Jacques Cousteau and also acclaimed French director Louis Malle. And they got together and took some of the first ever in-color underwater footage, sort of following Jacques Cousteau and his merry band of sailors or marine biologists / scientists, if you can describe them as that at this point in time. Anyway, it's them going around the ocean, the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Indian, basically exploring shipwrecks, coral reefs, general marine life. And it's just that for like 85 minutes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Documentary
No
about
Marines in this movie, though.
No Marines. That's a fair point.
Yeah.
This is largely a French crew that we're dealing with here.
They might have French Marines, but, you know.
They don't call them that.
No,
they
they
probably
have some
call
other
them
word.
French, Tanner.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of it? Tucker, your thoughts on this documentary?
I just quickly want to gather something that frames my enjoyment of this film
Okay, here we go.
that I can't find.
Is he trying to find a film about the ocean, potentially?
I'm trying to find a film that I enjoyed previously. Can someone go first real quick?
Okay, sounds good. I'll go first. I will say that if viewers will cast their mind back to our classic review of the film Titanic, little film you may have heard of. I noted that I could not watch the first 5 minutes or so of Titanic. That underwater footage that James Cameron had captured, some of the first ever footage of the Titanic wreckage at the bottom of the ocean. Couldn't watch that because of some deep-seated internal fears that I have about things concerning, shipwrecks, the depth of the ocean, that kind of thing. And so I similarly had a hard time with some of those aspects of this film. I also had a hard time watching some of the pretty explicit on-camera violence towards animals, just murdering marine life, whether they be whales or sharks or fish or what have you. And outside of that, I'd say this is a pretty solid feast for the eyes. I think the staggering visuals of capturing this underwater footage still hold up quite well, and you can definitely see why, if you're a French viewer or any viewer at the time who had never been under the ocean, why this was so fascinating to you. Because it's like, it would be crazy to see that for the first time.
Absolutely.
Like, we've been exposed to that imagery since we were old enough to recognize that kind of thing. And this is the first time that adult humans are seeing this. It looks like an alien planet. And I think if you put yourself in that mindset, you'll sort of be taken by a lot of the silent world, but also you'll also be perhaps somewhat distracted by some of the scientific practices taken by the crew here.
Major scare.
Yeah, so I figured it out. Figured out what I was looking for.
Here we go.
A film that I watched, part of the Criterion Collection, which is science is fiction. The films of Jean Penlev, and Jean Penlev was a French scientist who made earlier French documentaries about sea creatures in the ocean. He would capture these animals, he would film them, he would talk about the studies, and these are from about 10, 15 years before The Silent World was filmed, so most of them not in color, which is where the stipulation of actually being underwater and the color makes this film, The Silent World, so special. But I remember watching those films. It's a compilation of about 20 or so short documentaries that Jean Penlev directed about marine life, and just being completely mesmerized by them, especially under the guise of what it was like to learn about biology, and especially marine biology, when that was something that was basically totally unknown, especially from the scientific perspective. And that same energy, I think, carries over to the Silent World for me, which is the idea of not quite knowing from a scientific perspective what the way is to approach researching something like this. And from our 80 years later perspective, there are certainly elements of it that we find, as you were saying, to be aggressive and distracting. But I actually think that makes this film even more appealing to me, in that it shows sort of the error of scientific ways, in that we can't know what's wrong until we do it wrong the first time. And so watching these guys just kind of goof around and frankly be very violent, it was sort of a raw realism and a look into the evolution of the scientific process that I found to be completely illuminating. And on top of beautiful visuals and I think a phenomenal score, this was I thought it was fantastic. I like documentaries quite a lot. I remember, and I also like marine life quite a lot. I used to want to be a marine biologist.
Many children do. I think every kid kind of goes through that phase of life where they're like underwater and fish and stuff.
Yeah, but I was like really into like the deep sea stuff that didn't have any features, just like a bunch of
blob
together. It's like that's an animal.
Things that were never meant to be seen by the human eye.
And we don't quite get to that because this is about the 250 meters down below.
They pay a lot of time talking about so if you go to this depth that we're at right now, your brain starts fucking up. So we can't go any deeper than that. And actually, we're gonna go up right now.
Yeah.
But just so you know,
but I really did love this movie, and I through today will make the case that it is not okay to abuse marine animals, but
that's brave of you.
I, in some way, appreciated seeing it in this film.
Now that's a very interesting take. And I'll be forthwith and say that I didn't quite love it when they chopped up the baby whale and there's it's copious amounts of blood flowing out from it and these very intense underwater shots. I didn't like that part, but I did like a lot of the other parts. And I do kind of agree with you, actually, Tucker, that the elements of this film are so interesting because as a documentary, that genre has really evolved so much. Science as a field of study and practice has evolved so much, and like the technology in filmmaking has evolved so much. And so to see kind of this like prototypical version of what would spiral into Titanic. It would spiral into like Finding Nemo. I think so many of these very culturally important aspects of the ocean actually come from this movie. And like
Sure.
the bit where they outline the clownfish in the anemone, and that all is very entertaining. It's very well shot. I think our characters are, we really only get to see Jacques Cousteau as like an actual character. The other ones are just like, it's a dude who's hanging out, and the dog. We
Yeah.
like seeing the dog. Oh, the dog doesn't really like to see the meat, the fish get all chopped up. So there's humorous elements to this film as well. It's so weird to see an animal, like a nature documentary in which they harm and maim and
Yeah, I
are
mean,
mean
especially
to
when
some other
the
animals too. They go and like ride these tortoises, which in some ways
yes.
is awesome because like who would do that? And we do have it on footage, so on camera. That's awesome. But man, I don't think the tortoises want that, and they don't look like they're having a
No,
great
they
time
do. They
when
like it. They do.
like it. They like being ridden. So
Mhm.
I'm a bit conflicted of this, but otherwise very enjoyable to watch a documentary. And the underwater footage is really, really pretty. Lots and lots of striking imagery from that. Abram?
I think that the silent world really, to me, poses a central question, which is to what extent must our scores be harmed by the abject immorality of the film?
Mhm.
We were looking for the film. We had trouble finding it, and we ended up having to watch one really
This is
good
funny.
rip of the movie, while in another tab playing a version with actual suitable audio. We're trying to line it up
Mhm.
because this film is basically impossible to find, and I think it's because it's just abhorrent, the treatment of animals in the film, and I think that there's probably a good reason why they don't have this ready to stream on Amazon Prime, for instance.
Animal torture. You think that for all the immorality of the Amazon Corporation, they might take a stance against showing that on their streaming service.
Yeah, and so for me,
But they'll show the boys.
They'll show the boys after all.
It's all faked.
for me, I have an urge personally to give this like a 1 out of 10.
Okay.
I think it opens up an interesting conversation because I hear where you're coming from, Tucker, and I think it's an interesting POV. But I also think to when we review a film like Around the World in 80 Days and we talk about outdated racial depictions or ethnic depictions or stereotypes of people and the way we see those as reflecting poorly on the film as modern viewers casting our eye back.
Mhm.
To me, I feel similarly but more strongly when we're seeing with pretty interesting, for lack of a better word, abandon the murder of animals and the joking about that in the script.
Mhm.
The pufferfish, it's defense mechanism is good against predators, but it can't be good against dynamite, right?
Yeah.
To me, that's just simply unacceptable. And myself, as 1/4 of the Quest panel, that weighs much more heavily on my score of this film than really anything else.
Yeah.
So I come away from the film very, very, very critical of it, and really unable to look past that. And that's sort of where I stand on the silent world.
Well, I think that frankly the animal abuse is kind of really all there is to talk about this film from
Well,
like a
yeah.
critical and analytical perspective, because the rest of it is stuff we've frankly seen before and not seen necessarily better, because I think the music and the visuals are great in this
Mhm.
movie. But
It's well edited and whatnot.
but I watched plenty of Morgan Freeman talking over
Yeah.
footage of the ocean when I was a child.
Amazing What are those called? The Richard Attenborough ones?
Yeah,
What
yeah.
are those called? Yeah.
Yeah,
But
well, it was
whatever,
like
but
Planet
we've
Earth
seen
and-
plenty of this stuff.
Planet Earth,
That's
yes.
I loved Planet Earth when I was a kid. Yeah, and so the wonder of seeing this kind of stuff is, I think it's almost kind of moot. I think we can talk about this film from two interesting angles, which is how interesting it was as this being the first one for people seeing this the first time and how crazy
Mhm.
that must have been. But then it also is, I mean, it is the violence that is portrayed in this film that is the crux of the conversation about what makes this film historically interesting. And I think the reason why I don't come away as strongly against what on the side of what you're saying on this film does portray animal abuse, and it does portray significant violence and death towards many, many creatures. But I don't see that as immoral in the same sense that Around the World in 80 Days was, because for the scientific process of creating this film and what this film acts as a documentary, I see it more as a failing of the human understanding of things. It's just like, well, this is just how we have to do it. Like, they're talking about
They literally say that a number of times.
like, we have no better way to do this.
When he throws the stick of dynamite into the fucking coral reef or whatever, he says, well, how else are we supposed to know how many fish there are?
Exactly. And so I find that, like, personally, I wouldn't do it. But I find
do it a number of times.
I find it very sociologically appealing, I think, in that there wasn't any malintent. Frankly, from those people, it was a curiosity, a scientific curiosity of, they don't know what better way to do this. Obviously, the social norms of the time, and who knows where if it was different across the globe, but the social norm of the time in France, because that's what we're seeing, where that, the life of a pufferfish or a whale or whatever doesn't really matter too much to them. And so I don't necessarily think I see it as immoral, just as this is a capturing of the documentary of a scientific process of the time. And it makes it feel so much more distinct to me, because not only can they show it and do they show it, they show a lot of it, and they're excited to show it to us. And we've since had PETA and these things. It's like, no animals were harmed in making this film. Well, you cannot say that about this film. And I don't seek out animal death and harm in my day-to-day life, but being shown that element of the world through a documentary and not through a fictionalized movie where then they're killing a bunch of animals just for a story. This is about research. This is about that learning process of going through, and what we might see as a failing was the only way that they knew to do it back then. And again, it's like, you gotta break a few eggs.
Yeah. What I'll ask, Tucker, is the documentaries that you were explaining, that came out 30 years prior. What was what were those? What was the material of those? I guess.
It was probably more like the life cycle of those fish or whatever. Like, you're saying, like, oh, here's a seahorse, and the male seahorse will hold the babies in its little pouch, and then so you get a little footage of a seahorse. Like, here's a little dance, and you play a little music. It was much more about the life cycle and also the habitats of the fish and things like that, and the way that this movie only kind of is. But also, you would see fish, like, animal on animal
of course,
death and violence in the cycle of life.
You see that in, like, Planet Earth too.
Yeah, of course.
Which that's what I wanted to. I was going to interject that earlier when Timo was talking about, like, sort of comparing this with modern Planet Earth's Richard Attenborough, Morgan Freeman narrated kind of things, where the mode of operation there is to get the largest telephoto lens there is that we can create,
and watch it without.
Yeah. Get as far away from the animals as possible, and then just zoom in and watch them.
Observation, not interference.
Exactly. That is the mode of operation of both documentation and also a lot of times scientific research nowadays, is to sort of interfere with the subjects, the animals, their nature in general, as little as possible. And what I wanted to posit here is that
in the silent world, they're like, let's get our grubby fingers on these things.
Let's really just let's touch them, let's roll them over, let's cut them down, let's chop them up, let's hit them with hammers.
Let's make a friend. Let's give this grouper fish a name. He'll be our pet. We'll put him in jail.
They showed the grouper. I think it's a testament to sort of like how the treatment of the film previous to that, because that's the end of the film, is them making friends with the grouper, that you're like,
Ulysses, please.
Ulysses. In some translations, his name is Jojo.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. His name is Ulysses, please.
He looks more like a Ulysses, I'm gonna be honest. But like, I was at least on edge. That was like, are they gonna kill this fish at any point in the next 5 to 10 minutes? Like, it always seems a hair's breadth away from them. Like, and so we killed the fish.
It does.
So, but what I did
after they start killing the fish, you're like, okay, so everything's on the menu now, I guess.
Well, I do have to wonder how many of those fish they brought on board and ate afterwards.
I probably
I do have
think
to wonder.
a large amount. I think all the the like crustaceans and stuff, when they go and are trying to find lobsters and stuff, that's got to be for eating, not for science. Like,
Yeah.
which a whole different moral can of worms right there, but that's fine in my book. You can eat shellfish.
What I do want to posit though, and that was
You
this
must
is sort
hate
of
the Bible then.
my roundabout way of getting to this, is that I guess I don't know a whole lot about Jacques Cousteau.
Yeah.
But I guess in general, this film, in my limited cultural knowledge of him, I think of him less as like a scientist and
Mhm.
more as an explorer.
Sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think if you approach it from that angle, it is still, awful what he's doing, but at least he's not like mishandling the scientific method or anything
Mhm.
like that. Like we don't see them at least explain we're running experiments on these things. They're more like, we're going to go down, we're going to see what we can see, we're going to document, we're going to
Yeah.
blow up these fish and put some of them in jars to like document the species and stuff like that. Like that's as far as into science as they go. Is that like
In the film,
put,
yeah.
sort of documenting the species and how they live beneath the surface and everything.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think that a big part of why this film is, I think I watched a video essay a couple months ago about Jacques Cousteau, and he made a couple other films too, and specifically the adventures of the boat that they're on, the Calypso, and the story of it, getting that cool front-looking window and getting the hatch in the kitchen that you can leave from the bottom to go surprise your diver friends in. That like whole adventurism, this like cool boat, and like they're filming from a helicopter a lot of the times. They don't really show this, but that boat had a helipad. Like there's all this elements of cool that the movie is espousing about itself. They're French. They're getting to dive with this new technology. They have a ship. They travel all over the world, and I think
They
specifically,
have their scooters that they call, they're these like little propeller deals that
yeah,
are
yeah,
pretty
yeah.
cool.
I mean, it's like fun, entertaining, and for especially a 50s audience, the worldliness of this movie, I feel like is very palpable and totally would draw, and it did, like lots and lots of people to the audience. Like Jacques Cousteau was a famous figure for decades in like the 50s, 60s, and 70s because
Yeah.
of his
I mean, we'd heard his name before this film.
yeah, we had. And there's the books that he made and the movies. And what I understand is that that was all part of the cycle of the expeditions are to gather the material to
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
the media, and the media is the means to fund the expeditions. And so that does put a little different, I think, like moral look at like what the abuse that they cause in this film, because I think it's not quite as like they're just trying to go explore. I think they are actually trying to go explore in front of the camera, and that's the only reason that they're
Oh,
there.
sure.
And then it's to make a movie, which weird to get in about documentaries, right? Because that is you're trying to show your subject, you're trying to display whatever is happening in real life. But I mean, let's just say if they ran over the baby whale on purpose so that it would
Yeah, we were thinking about
provide a
that.
situation
Yeah, we did.
in which they could shoot a bunch of shark stuff, I wouldn't be surprised at all, honestly. Like that actually seems right in the playbook of
Yeah.
filmmakers and just like how people acted in this time period. And we are so
totally.
appalled by that, I think, because of this whole environmental movement. And these like shots of, it looks like hundreds of dolphins coming out of the water to or porpoises, I think they said in the film, to play with them. That just doesn't exist anymore. That's gone in our Earth. And so it's very sad for us to see that, and then to also see in the same film that very destruction that we have been harmed by, and we know that we're not able to see the same things that they were.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's complicated because you raise a good point. I think you all have raised really good points about the topic. And ultimately, if you're thinking about the scientific dimension of the film, which is intriguing to your point, Chandler, not in the movie all that much. Even after we do the dynamite fishing to get the specimens, and we hand them off to the guy who's actually organizing all of them, we never actually see his work. We
No.
see a quick shot of him putting the fish into jars, but then we don't go back to him again.
Mhm.
But I think in fairness, Tucker, you're totally right that ultimately this was the mode of doing things for a period of time.
Yeah.
And that still drastically impacts my score, but I think what feels more egregious to me and more along the lines of what you're saying, Timo, is the way in which that shark sequence in particular feels constructed for the sake of drama
Yeah,
in a
definitely.
way that I don't
Spectacle.
really think was necessary or even useful just in the context of this as a film.
Yeah.
There's kind of like a logic hole in that too. To your point, they like they kill the whale, and then they feed the whale to the sharks, and then they get mad at the sharks for eating the whale and kill some sharks.
Yes,
And it's
right.
like
Yeah.
you are not they say that they're avenging the whale. Motherfuckers, you killed the whale.
Because there's
I'm
also
Christ.
there's a moment earlier in that sequence wherein they're following the bigger whale, and there's a line in the script to the effect of the sailors couldn't help themselves, and they're down at the bow, throwing their harpoon at the big
Oh,
whale.
yeah, that's right.
Even though that can't, as they say, injure the whale, they still want to do it.
Yeah.
I think you make a good point, Timo, in that to me, the script, as spare as it is, the footage they choose to use, the way it's assembled, does paint that sequence in particular with, at minimum, and to be charitable, a great disregard for the creatures
Yeah, of
in the
course.
scene. And so I just have to wonder,
and they happen
as
to
a
be
viewer,
sperm whales, which and like these majestic, like some of the most beautiful creatures on this planet. Honestly, like whales are special, really special.
Well, except for the girl watching this.
yes.
Let the man be
Very good.
serious. Abrams.
5 comedy points.
I have to wonder as a viewer, what am I really supposed to feel during the shark sequence? And then as a modern viewer, I have to say, well, what redeeming value can I find in the light of the fact that they're just slaughtering these creatures in the situation they constructed?
Yeah.
I think one of the issues I have with the silent world when I take the moral issues I have out of it is that I'm not even entirely sure what narrative arc I'm really supposed to follow and why we're building this moment of great tension with the shark encounter, other than the fact that as per the sort of parameters of a film, we ought to have some sort of climax.
Sure.
I think when you take that in conversation with the real violence of the movie, to me it becomes extremely objectionable. Separating the scientific element, at least I can meet in the middle there, from these other sequences, or the getting on the Galapagos tortoises, climbing on the green sea turtles.
Oh yeah,
I just think that is that's a sort of violence without even a culturally reasoned basis that to me just destroys the film.
No, that's totally fair. The interesting thing is, I can talk about this film from a scientific perspective and a sociological perspective that I find so interesting. And I agree that those are not the majority of the film, even though I think it more in a adventure documentarian sense, not as Jean Penlev was. This is the octopus that has 8 arms, and it does this, and then you study like the way that it lays its eggs or whatever. That is not this film. This film is. Can you guys believe that this stuff exists on this planet?
Yeah.
That's crazy. And so for me, I think the science and the adventure and the spectacle all converge, and I think for me a really sociologically appealing way of, this is very much I was drawing the distinction between observation and interference. This is very much an interference, but I almost think that for the intent of this film, especially at the time, I see that as not morally okay from my modern point of view, but exciting and interesting, and I can understand why these creative choices as the director of a film like this, and one of very few people on the planet with access to create a film like this, why you would then want this to be an interesting spectacle to sort of change the world. I mean, frankly, you're the one making this film. Like, all right, you film some underwater stuff, cool enough. You want people to see this. You want people to know about this. And so then you're like, well, what do people like? They like violence. They like spectacle. They like some craziness. And the
what are the humans of 1956 like? Violence.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's just true for human history. Like people just like seeing shit blow up and go crazy.
People want to be titillated by that kind
exactly.
of thing.
And so I see that the I agree that they probably ran over that whale on accident and then, or on purpose, and then the sharks came and then it's like all for tension and stuff. And I'm like, I'm watching these sequences and they're like getting their hands dirty with all this stuff and getting their grubby little French finger line and everything. And I'm like, that's still kind of interesting. And frankly, I think it makes the film more interesting. Of like, yeah, it is more exciting and it is more like in your face and graphic, and it does set it apart from the modern take on documentary and a modern take on what the reality of this world is, because the underwater world, because the silent world, if you will, because I don't think I would have been almost at all interested or entertained by this film if it was just a very similar in structure and tone documentary to the Planet Earths and whatnot
But you
that
said
I've
you
watched.
loved Planet Earth.
I did, and I've watched a lot of that.
Yeah.
But
The thing
as
about
a Palme d'Or winner,
Oh, sure.
not as much. But it's
Planet
like
Earth,
this as a
yeah.
moment in time and a reflection of the culture and a reflection of it being a film that someone is making to excite an audience. I found that to be like, it all like made sense in my mind. I was watching, I'm like, well, I don't want to hurt those sharks, but like,
I like watching them be hurt.
but I'm like, well, it's on film, and that's very fascinating.
And I think the
I mean-
things that you said that make the film different from other movies, though,
Sure.
unfortunately, are pretty much all in like a negative category. Whether interest, Planet Earth movies and these newer films do so much legwork with filmmaking, which is they're incredible pieces
Yeah.
of like film art because of the narrative work that they do in creating a story out of characters that can't speak and that we can't predict,
Yeah.
and that often, they're in Planet Earth, they're swapping out the squirrels. There's a shot of a
course.
bunny running or being chased by something, and then on the next shot you think it's the same bunny, but it's it's a different bunny from a different year. But it works narratively. It works because it's compelling to our human sense of like story. And this film, it works in that way through a travelogue. It's like we went to all these places, our boat. I think the boat actually plays a very big part in the appeal of the film. I said so earlier, but the ways that the human story is the things that are interesting to this, and that's coming at the expense of the nature, and
Yeah,
comes at
definitely.
the expense of, in the runtime of the film, we spend time up talking about the diving and we, zoom around on the scooters and like, it's all fine. But the real like meat of, I think what has been shown you can do with nature documentaries. Of course, the filmmakers who started out were like, oh, I want to, they're 16 and they're like, I want to make nature documentaries. Like, of course they watched this. Like, of course, people who went on to then make the great stuff today saw this, and we could feel that influence. But I think we also feel the influence in like the inverse of like, we're not going to do it
totally.
like that.
Yeah. So I guess if I can sort of try and put a bow on this whole thing, is that like, obviously none of us like seeing these animals be killed on screen.
Yeah.
It's pretty graphic in the film. It's, I mean, the way in which
Yeah.
the way, and they tell you it's a baby whale. so
Shooting the
there's a-
whale, crazy.
Hmm.
That was nuts. I'd never seen anything like that in my life.
But this conversation around like it being a different time, this being an artifact of exploration and stuff like that. I think what it hints at to me is more that this film can be, if you want to read it this way, not saying that necessarily saying you have to, like it's a encapsulation of like of human hubris.
Sure.
I
Totally.
mean, we're talking about this as an adventure
thinking
film. Jacques
you were going to
Cousteau
talk
as,
about
as
colonialism.
well, I'm getting there, Timo.
I knew it. I knew
Jacques
it.
Cousteau as an explorer or something like that. And what you also have to keep in mind for the people of 1956 is that the world is sort of post World War II at that point. We have settled into a pseudo modern history, and I don't know, like it's still towards the end of this era where people want a new and exciting world. We're looking towards this. We're looking towards space and things like that. We are looking to, in essence, conquer new worlds. There is that inherent sort of, human, but also this is a distinctly Western. France is obviously a massive colonial nation for much of its existence. Was concerned with stretching its influence across the globe. And I think there's an element of that to Cousteau's work in the silent world.
Yeah.
as much as there is to the fact, as much as there is in the look at this cool stuff. Look at this cool stuff that our scuba divers are doing. Look at these cool fish. Look at these cool plants, etc. I think you can read both elements to it. So, to the point of is this film responsible? No, I think Cousteau. I was just reading quickly. Later in his life, became much more of a nature conservationist, and I'm sure looked back on his actions and his crew's actions in this film with a little bit of dread and disappointment and regret.
Yeah.
At the same time, however, it is effectively a snuff film for many living creatures.
Yeah.
And snuff films, not something that I necessarily would condone. So it's very complex how you choose to look at this thing. It is intended to sort of capture the imagination of its viewers in this world that had never been depicted in color as we would see it before. And it's meant to invoke a new planet, a new world that humans can finally reach out, explore, and photograph and everything. And it's just so fascinating to like try and put yourself in the mindset of that. And Jacques Cousteau, as you said, Timo, with this cycle of him trying to fund his adventures by making these films, and he having to up the ante with what he's showing or what he's doing.
Was this his first major underwater film? Or?
It was his first. I saw it was the first, obviously the first film to win Best Documentary at the Cannes Film Festival. Also, the first of Cousteau's films to win the Best Documentary prize at the Academy Awards.
Oh, interesting.
First of a couple for him. So I think it was the one that really broke out for him for obvious reasons. I mean, for the background and the historic marker of this film is notable. And the cycle of all of it is something that's sort of displayed in like Wes Anderson's The Life Aquatic, and things like that. Like that's effectively about Jacques Cousteau and his search, his like Moby Dick style search to try and find this lost sea creature, and trying to fund his explorations through films and whatnot. So I don't know. It's I think with all the thoughts that we've expressed, I think we can all agree that it's pretty complicated and really comes down to your personal persuasion on how you view like films as historical artifacts versus something that need to be evaluated with the eye of the person who is viewing it in the year that they're viewing it.
And your opinion on if fish should live or die or not.
Well, I like fish to live, but also I like to eating fish. You know, this is the complicated thing that we all must
Welcome to
wrestle
human
with.
nature.
Where's the line on the horse to cat spectrum of pet to food?
I don't like seeing sharks beat with hammers, but also I eat sushi semi-regularly, and that contributes to overfishing and things like that.
When I go fishing with my dad up north, like, and we catch a big fish and we're gonna eat it. We
hit it with hammers to kill it.
Hit it with a hammer to kill it. I'm not gonna. I mean, it's not nice. The fish
you
doesn't
may
like
hit
it
on the side of the boat or something.
People carry, especially if you're like still big. If you're like deep sea big fishing, you hit it with hammers.
Yeah,
to be. I don't know. We're in the weeds here, but it's maybe I don't know. You're killing the animal in one way or another. You should ideally kill it in the fastest, painless, like most painless, quickest way, which often is blunt trauma to the head, really hard. And I don't know.
Not
it's
dynamite.
Not
dynamite.
Not dynamite. I mean, that technically is the same thing, just via force of shockwave.
That's actually a great point.
Yeah. Well, as they point out, I think, or maybe Aaron, this was you mentioning, and I'm just injecting your voice into the narration on the film too, is that the dynamite doesn't necessarily kill them.
No.
It just basically immobilizes them, and then they're dragged out of the water and drown on land.
Yeah. Well, they mentioned in the film that it ruptures their float bladders.
Yeah.
Which, as far as I know, is like it's used to regulate movement, and so like it's basically like rupturing someone's eardrum.
Yeah.
Like the balance is completely off, and so then they can't like operate.
Yeah. It's like paralyzing a person and then chucking them into a body of water.
Yeah.
Effectively.
They end up
Not
on
a
the
good thing to
bottles.
do.
Yeah.
Well,
I would be on the bottom of the water.
Any more thoughts, or should we rank this baby?
I had this one cooking. I had this one cooking for a while. They ran over the whale on porpoise.
Ooh.
Nicely done.
Well, well. Well, I well, I do think that there are
There's
What do you wanna talk
still another aspect of this film that I want to talk about, which is frankly, the majority of the runtime is the awe-inspiring underwater sequences, and frankly, like these multiple distinct sequences of different sea creatures and different interactions with
Yeah.
sea creatures that are beautifully photographed. And I think for me, the one that really set this film artistically as something like emotionally impactful was the sequence when they like point off the ship and like, look, the porpoises are there. And then there's this like 6 minute long sequence of just like epic big band music set to thousands of porpoises cresting the waves. And I was just sitting there like, that's amazing. Like that's one of the most phenomenal visual spectacles I've ever seen in my life.
For as much as I didn't like watching it for my own personal fears, the sequence where they like find the shipwreck,
Yeah.
it also helps that this is a sequence where they're not killing fish or torturing fish by any means. Like when it's just him and he's like swimming along this like long sunken ship that's all rusted, and like we do a wide of him like swimming up the side of it straight, and then we cut to a fish doing the same thing, like following him. I was like, I can understand what Cousteau is trying to get at here.
Totally.
I mean, that's kind of like the note that he ends the film on. If there is any sort of takeaway from the film outside of, hey, look at the cool underwater stuff, it is this moment, the stuff with Ulysses that we were talking about, that, well, yes, we were on edge that they were going to kill him. In the film, they're talking about, like, you know, can man and fish have some sort of personal connection? Like, here are these two fish who do not experience, who do not like cohabitate, or you know, they don't have a symbiotic relationship by any means. They are just swimming side by side, and we're projecting on them, we're anthropomorphizing them as friends.
Yeah.
And can man and fish be friend? And that's the note that effectively the film ends on. I don't know if they do a good job necessarily of like threading that through the entire film. It's more of just like a, you know, a little aperitif to end the film on, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, again, what I find interesting about the placement of this film as both an adventure and a scientific thing, and then again the sociological aspect, is this is the earliest days of researching fish behavior and all this stuff, and so they don't have any final points of like, this is what this means, or we know how this works. They have no idea, and so they're looking at how the coral grows, and they're looking at how the fish like swim across one another, and they're seeing how turtle eggs, like the turtles come out of the beach, and they're like, did a tank come by here? Like, what's going on? Like, there is I think an inherent wonder to the fact that not even the people making this film know what, like they didn't know what was happening at the time. And so I think that really helped color the wonder for me, because while I may have felt that same wonder as a child watching Planet Earth and learning about how seahorses life cycle works and how the turtle life cycle works, I am coming to this film with the knowledge of, oh, I know that the turtle plants the eggs in the sand, and then later down the line they come out of the sand and like water towards the ocean. Like I was able to spout off some turtle facts as it was happening, but
you probably shouldn't be shining a bright flashlight at the baby turtles, because that a lot of times they think that's the moon, and so they don't go to the ocean and then they die.
Exactly. Like we come to it with this kind of knowledge. We know what coral is. We know how it grows. We know how the ecosystem works. We know what pollution is. Like we know these things. But then watching this film of a largely untouched natural world, which is becoming increasingly more rare nowadays, through the lens of people who have never seen any of this before and are just discovering it for the first time, I actually kind of like the sort of raw curiosity that comes from them, like not having a final point or like a scientific, like, this is how this works, because they have no idea, and no one would know for another 15 years after that. And so sociologically, it's like, it's so fascinating to me that this moment in time, in history, in exploration, in science, was captured on film in this breathtaking way, because usually documentaries in the past are not as much filmically made. I think this is a well filmically made film, and there's some early ones like there's this one about an Inuit man.
Nanu of the North.
Yeah. Nanook of the North.
Nanook of the North.
Nanook of the North. I think it's a phenomenal film. And it is good, well filmically made, but most documentaries pre-1970s or whatever are just kind of like scientific camera sitting still watching something. But this, I think, strikes an interesting balance between being a documentary of the natural world and the process that goes into exploration and blunt scientific discovery, but also being a
very competently crafted cinematic experience with swelling music and beautiful colors. One of my favorite elements of this film is the fact that the way that the old cameras and the old camera stock works with the way that light filters underwater. So it's not the
So
most bright
beautiful.
colors, but it's like a mustard and turquoise sort of
Yeah.
mush and like gray. And I'm like,
yeah,
that's like really striking visually
it's more
it's not
saturated.
well, I don't know. I would say it's desaturated because if
Really?
you compare it to something like Finding Nemo or to like a modern documentary where you see like the bright greens and the bright oranges.
I'm sure-
This is
I
more
think
like
that's
a
more-
reds, like
Ooh,
dark maroons
I think I
and
see what you mean.
mustard colors. Like this is
It's a
very confined color
it's
palette because
darker
the old film
colors.
stock could not capture the underwater light because they didn't know how light levels worked through layers of water and stuff.
I see what you mean.
It makes a very visually distinct film.
I know. I think the colors are still super striking. So I wouldn't.
of course they are.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
call them like desaturated, but there is an element to like
Yeah.
the lighting and how that plays with it. That's sort of visually interesting here, and I think there's something to the film being that visual feast above a lot of other things.
Just the last thing I will say.
Okay.
Not to beat a dead shark that was eating a dead whale, but Nanook of the North is an interesting thing to raise because if we're thinking about the same documentary, it has famously been debunked basically front to back for being a complete fabrication.
Yeah, and
effect.
it's pretty stereotypy too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in 1930, what do you expect?
But the reason I raise it is because also when you think about this film, I agree that there's really beautiful images in here, but even when we're thinking about the end of the film, the relationship Ulysses has to those people is because they're feeding him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the beautiful shots of these like helixes of fish around the diver at the end, again, they're being fed. I think that to me, I can't escape the inauthenticity of the film.
Sure.
And I can't. I return to Tima's point from before of a from a modern viewer's perspective, a frustration that they have this untapped ocean and they are choosing to destroy the coral and they're choosing to impose themselves in there instead of just highlighting the beauty of the fish as is. Because if my favorite moments of the fish are when they are being photographed as undisturbed as they can be.
Sure.
Of course, the camera is there, the diver is there, but when they give the ecology space to simply be beautiful by its own merit, I think it's successful in sort of prompting a desire in people to treat the ocean as a living organism to be respected and taken care of. But I think that the artifice really harms the experience for me. And I think about the fact that when we're looking at Quest films, the ones we put up to the top are the ones that retain a sort of fresh or timeless dimension and a level of filmmaking quality that transcends their release. And I certainly understand that there is a historical importance and a formal beauty to the way these things are shot. But when the main sort of timeless quality or the differentiator is abject violence, I think to me it intrinsically sort of falls further and further down my list through the terms with which we assess Quest films. I don't really see any reason why I would tell somebody to watch The Silent World over any ocean documentary they can simply find on Netflix.
Yeah.
My
And so I
Octopus
find myself
Friend.
just
Great.
That's a
ocean-
great movie.
That's a
Exactly.
great movie.
Yeah, love that film.
so I find myself very just sort of unmoored and disappointed by this movie.
Like a
in
boat in
whole.
the ocean.
Like like an astronaut in the ocean.
I think it's interesting because I understand that, but to be honest, I completely disagree in that I think that this film, as a film with a lot of violence and the touching and messing with things and like literally destructing the fish, but like disturbing the fish is the word I was looking for, and feeding them and things, that is something I'd never seen on film before. And so, as a film that I think doesn't necessarily stand the test of time moral wise, but in terms of I've been watching ocean documentaries and I've been watching films for 20 years of my life. I've never seen anything like this. I still actually do think that there's a very strong case to present this film as something that stands the test of time apart from its other things. And I, of course, understand that because it is the violence, that's something you can see as a negative. But I don't approach it that way in that it's because this is a documentary, I don't feel the immorality as much. It would be like when we watch these films that are fictionalized and they are representing the fictionalized narratives that are representing immorality, I find those to be much more frustrating because there was, I think, more of a choice to the way that people could have portrayed things in that time. But I don't think there is as much of a choice in the documentary sense of this film. Of there's no thought in these people's minds because none of this stuff had happened. The ecology movement, the environmentalism movement, these things had not happened yet. There was no sense of animals going extinct in the same way that we have today. And so I don't see it as immoral, and so it doesn't hurt my experience with the film as much. Like, I mean, that's just how it was. In a very real sense, because this is a film of, it's a documentary of what took place, and of course, it's shaped by the perspectives of the people making it and of the filmmaking like spectacle aspect that we talked about earlier. But I disagree that there isn't a reason to suggest this to someone versus any insert X a documentary here, because I do think that this is very, very distinct in a way that I actually don't think any given ocean documentary is, because those are all going to take a very um similarly approached angle. This is a totally different angle to view ocean ecology from, and view discovery and wonder. And so I think it really does stand apart from that angle, and that's why when I watch a film for Quest, I'm like, well, what does this do that I have not seen before? And the Silent World did a lot that I had not seen before, and so for me it rises quite high in my ranking of these films.
Yeah, I mean, we can go back and forth on moralizing about documentary, and you know, obviously there is the more real element that we're discussing here is that like they're killing living creatures on screen,
Yeah.
and can you abide that or can't you?
Yeah.
And then, if we were watching fucking Cannibal Holocaust for Quest, I don't know, our discussion would probably be somewhat similar, but also those are human lives, not animal lives, etc. So I don't know. We could like dance around this issue that all that we want, but
Dances
I think
with fish.
I think our stances on it are fairly clear, unless anyone else wants to make any final things on it.
I'll
But
just say
yeah,
that I
I
think
don't know.
our modern viewing of the film, well, I think because it's so easy to find this content like really objectionable, like just like you should not do this, you should not film this nowadays. It's like so implicitly understood in our filmmaking industry now that this is just not what you
Yeah.
do. That I think our viewing of it and watching of it is actually divorced from the morality of what they're choosing to do, and we are not supporting them in doing more of it by viewing it,
Mhm.
or nor are we supporting other people going out and doing the same thing by promoting or at least sharing the movie, maybe with a bit of a, hey, if you can't handle animals getting killed, like, don't watch this one.
Yeah, I mean that's important for we had this discussion about like recommending it.
Yeah.
Similar to a documentary that the film that won Best Documentary at the Academy Awards last year, 20 Days on Mariupol,
Ah.
which is just like seeing actual dead bodies, actual fucking dead babies and things like that. Like you see that on screen. The filmmakers are not doing that, of course. They are
Yeah.
capturing the war in Ukraine, but there's an element to that as well. Is that these guys are just blatantly showing you dead people, or
Yeah.
or dead animals, even in that film, and dead animals in this one. The main difference is, of course, the filmmakers of this one are actively murdering
Yes.
animals.
So we're watching them do it. They're not hiding it.
They're not hiding it. So yeah, I mean,
Well,
I won't
Jacques
throw
Cousteau
my hands
is
up
dead,
and say,
and the whales are not dead yet. So
it's true.
So who gets the last laugh?
Who gets the last laugh? I don't know. Yeah. Anyway.
Ready to give a score, Tina?
Yes.
yeah, let's give it a score. Boop boop boop. I punched mine in. 3.
Oh, beep, 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 beep,
Oh,
beep,
doom, 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 doom.
beep, beep,
Oh,
beep.
Duggar's got to hit his. Wow, we are really
I did.
split. This one's probably one of the most split ever. There is no tie. We have no tie. This film got a 5.1. Starting at the bottom, Abram, of course, gave it a 1.0, as he said he would. I gave it a 4.9.
Man
Tanner
of his
gave
word.
it a 6.0, and then Tucker gave it an 8.4. And so 5.1 is a score. It's going to go above The Go-Between, if you remember that movie, and
Yeah.
Dumbo, which you definitely remember that one. At spot number 23.
Me and my friends would have killed Dumbo with hammers, I can tell you that much. Oh dear. Well, we can look forward to one more riveting discussion on the nature of documentary filmmaking with it. Hey, maybe we'll get him next.
Should we? I think we should not even say what it is.
No.
People
Well,
can
hey,
go look it up if they want
I kind
to,
of
but-
coming up.
don't remember which one it is.
That's true.
It's coming up. All right, shall we roll, Timo? Shall we roll it? Roll it and bowl it?
Yep. Let's get this all set right. Is it set right? Almost?
I'm ready.
There you have it.
Wheel, what's your deal? Give us a movie that makes us squeal. Is it on digital or is it on real? Wheel, what's your deal?
And Wheel's deal is number 43.
What's it 3? Okay. Oh, look at this.
Oh, okay. We are going to get not the first, but one of the first Best Picture nominees that we have reviewed for this show. And this is not one that we've reviewed for because it did not win Best Picture, but this is the 1982 film directed by Costa Gavras, starring Jack Lemmon and Sissy Spacek. We'll be watching Missing.
Missing. Interesting.
Okay.
I watched this movie.
No,
Don't
did you?
remember a diddly darn thing about it. I
Wow,
did not
that
like it
makes
very
sense.
much.
Oh, well, you gave it 3 out of 5.
It was like totally just wash in my brain.
Well, what a
But
great
Yes.
thing to look forward to then. Yippee.
Yes.
I mean, people like it. It seems like so.
Take Tucker's opinion with a grain of salt, of course.
Yeah.
As usual.
As you should always do when
older
watching
Jack
a
Lemmon
hour
in
of
this.
me
I'm
talking
actually
about film.
looking forward to seeing that. Because
All right.
I've really
Should we
only
give
seen him
do
in
a
younger stuff.
synopsis?
No.
Oh, okay.
There's
You'll
that.
never know what this movie is about.
No, it's okay. You
Figure it out
can't
next week.
You can't look it up. It's a very vague title, so you'll never know. You know. Oh wait, palm details. Hang on a second. Back
Oh,
up.
this guy.
Reel it back. All right. Joined president in 1956. There was 2 of them. Louise de Vilmorin of France and Otto Preminger of the U.S. filmmaker that some people may recognize.
Otto Preminger
Well-
of the U.S. Yeah. Okay, bro.
Kind of.
He was representing the
Yeah.
U.S. I guess I should say. That's how it's denoted on the Wikipedia articles.
Man's
So,
not from the
so-
U.S.
Well, yes. He might have been an American citizen. Who's
Oh,
to
I'm
say,
sure.
you
I'm
know?
sure he figured
Probably
that
was,
stuff
yeah.
out.
Okay. Of the 39 films in competition that year, which is a lot actually, 1956, The Silent World won, beating out other notable films such as The Man Who Knew Too Much from Alfred Hitchcock. That's the second iteration of that film.
I just went and saw that one. That's pretty
directed.
good.
Good movie.
Smiles of a Summer Night by Ingmar Bergman, The Roof by Vittorio De Sica, The Phantom Horse by Koji Shima, and Panther Panchali by Sajid
Panther
Ray.
Panchali.
Panther.
There's no N.
Oh, there is no.
But you put an N because it looks like Panther to the
Oh,
American eye.
it might have auto-corrected as well.
Fair enough. Panther Panchali.
Yes. Those are the films it beat.
By Satyajit
Wow.
Ray, by the
Yes.
way.
Actually, some notable films there.
Some notable films
Some.
and filmmakers and so on and so forth.
There you have it.
Yada, yada, yada.
Thank you, fellas, for
week.
discussing this film, getting our moral qualms out there in the open for the audience. We gotta.
In the
What
open
is your
ocean.
stance on morality in general or about fish? Put it in the comments.
Do you like murdering animals? Let us know in the comments below.
Is it better or worse if you do it on camera?
if I run over a whale in the woods, does it make a noise?
God. All right, enough joking about stuff
If you find a
that
bear
we're.
carcass on the road and you take it in your car,
Where would you
If
Where
I
would you bury
dynamite a
that?
bear
Where would
and
you
leave it
bury
in
something
Central
that-
Park?
All
put a
right,
bicycle on top of it. Christ.
don't go anywhere. We won't be missing when we talk about next week's film.
Ah.
You know what I say? Stay cool, keep warm, peace.
Of course they can be.
No, yeah, but
What the fuck else would
no,
an
what I'm saying, I don't-
idea be?
No, that's what I'm saying. What else would an idea be?
Well, I don't know. When initially you learn about nouns, they teach you that it's like person, place, thing. What?
Like, what's an example of an idea?
I'm gonna kick you in the head. That's like
That's what I'm. That's the idea
That's what
I'm
I
formulating
want.
right now.